Lisa, thank you and welcome to the Live Full and Work Fun podcast. And I am, I had the delight of meeting you in person recently, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today.
Yes, thank you so much, Gayla. I really am just so excited to be here. It's something I've been looking forward to and continuing our conversation.
Yes, when we first met, you were telling me your story of transition. Uh, Before we get into that, though, I would love for you to tell me maybe a little tidbit of a fun fact about yourself that may have not been in your bio.
Ooh, oh my, so many things I could pop in there. A fun fact about me. I have a little friend that lives in my backyard. He is a red cardinal, and we have continuing conversations. I feed the bird feeder, and he comes in and he just lights on my porch, and that's just something I have this special affinity for that type of bird. So that would be one thing.
Oh, that's a wonderful share. Cardinals are a beautiful, beautiful
They
bird.
really are. They really are.
And
I'm always so fascinated how the male and female, like the coloring is so different, but they're both beautiful in their own way.
now, are they the kind of birds that do you know if they like pair up? Um,
I don't know that. I haven't got that far into it. I always love the red color. So that's
yeah,
about as far as I
yeah.
get.
You might want to see it. I'm assuming it's a little male cardinal.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
the
you
red one
might
would be.
see if he brings along a mate
He
and
often does have one that's not too far
yeah,
from him.
I think that they
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. But let's talk about you a little bit. When I first met you and we had our first conversation, you were telling me a little bit about yourself of your background, that you're in education, and then you made a shift. And in the bio, I had mentioned that when you realized your gifts and you didn't want to follow someone else's script anymore, that's when you started your business. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, sure. Like many people, Gayla, I found myself in job transition, what I'd been doing. So first I had started my career as a teacher. I'm a lifelong learner. I love education. So what was I going to do for a job? I was going to go to school and become a teacher because I wanted to share that with other people. And so eventually I came to be one of the founders of a private faith-based school here in Metro Atlanta. And that was so exciting because if you think of growing an organization from the ground up, and at the time we started, I was the first volunteer with one employee, which was the head of school. And so, coming in together to build this, but you have to do things like select curriculum and get staffing and, find students and funding and all types of things. So it was really a passion project for me. It was something that I love to do. I'm a creator. So putting all of that together, but then after about 18 years, I was on my fourth boss at that point, and the time came where there was a decision that my position was going to be dissolved. The school was going to go a different direction, and there were several people that found themselves in the same situation. So as I was walking out, I said to my friend, I wonder what I'll do next. Maybe I'll start my own company. Now, I had not even thought about that before. It just popped out of my mouth. But I love messaging. I love marketing. I love helping people solve problems. And I thought, if I could help some of the parents that had been coming to the school that were struggling in their businesses so they could have a much better life, so they could love their jobs, so they could love their businesses, then that may solve some of the things that I saw, the relationships between parents and their children. They wouldn't have to live through their kids. And so that is when I decided that I would start a marketing business. And that's was about 4.5 years ago, and that's where I am today.
That is amazing. Well, when you were starting that educational organization, that was very entrepreneurial of you.
Yes, it really was. And you know what I've come to realize in this time since is this should not have come as a surprise to me at all. My parents were serial entrepreneurs. They had six different businesses. So I learned at the feet of two giants, my mother and father, each bringing their own special talents to it, that when you see a problem, um, and you can come up with a solution, a viable solution that people would want to pay money for, um, then go for it. Go for it. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of creativity into it. There's a lot of problem solving. Not everything is roses, though. You know, there's problems. It's a big roller coaster, but I just love the thought of creating new things and bringing solutions to people.
Well, I think that you just answered this question. What makes work fun for you? That creative process?
Yes, that creative process. But you know, what I have evolved to, Gayla, is really understanding when I first started my business. And you know, in the bio, it talks about following someone else's script. When I first started my business, I was still following someone else's script. And here's how that played out is I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own marketing company, working on marketing strategy and messaging. So, what does an entrepreneur do? Well, they go network. So, I would go to networking events and, you know, go to coffee, and I was playing this game of being an entrepreneur. I would have clients, I would do my business. And then someone came up to me one day. I was at a pitch presentation. So, you know, when startups get ready to go seek funding from venture capitalists, they have pitch presentations where they practice. And so I was at this event giving feedback to some of these companies. And at the end one day, someone else in the audience came up to me and said, you know, Lisa, what you're doing is great. You give amazing advice, but you're holding back. And I looked at her and I said, what are you talking about? And so we ended up going to coffee. She is a transformation coach. I ended up working with her and realized that the script I was following of playing this person that had this marketing company was not fully who I was. And so that set me on a journey for several years where I came to discover kind of the parts of me that I'd left behind as a child when people said, no, you can't do this or you don't do it that way. And so what I've done really is reinvented myself. And so helping other entrepreneurs, helping other small business owners, helping people who are working on their personal brands understand there's the part of you know, and then there's parts of you that you don't know. So helping peel back those layers and watching the aha moments they have of realizing I have this gift, I have this skill, I am able to do this, and I can invent a whole new life. So that is something that just really sets my soul on fire.
That is so fascinating, Lisa, because as you were saying that, I was taken back 10 years ago when I started my business. I felt like I was kind of not a shell of a person, but I was supposed to be this type of person. And you go network and people expect you to be a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
it just felt odd, or there was a disconnect. And it's like, who maybe it was like, who am I? And since then, evolving through that, because I I think it's fascinating and really hits home, at least for me, and I'm sure for uh, most of my audience. It's like, yeah, you leave one world, go into another world anew, but you're still playing that role of who trying to be who other people think you should be.
Yes, exactly. And I think the hard part for me in the transition was I didn't have my job title anymore. I didn't have my role, I didn't have my position, I didn't have my community. So I put on a new set of clothes of what I thought I should be. And I never took the time to really examine who I really was. And so that is where I've developed this process that I went through to really understand who I am, what I bring to the world, and the courage to show up and be that.
Well, you're a business storyteller, and and
Yes.
what does that mean, and how does that uh, help your clients understanding storytelling?
Yes. So, storytelling has been around for thousands of years, right? Think about when you hear someone say, I want to tell you a story. Think about what, like, just the physical things that take place in your mind and your body. You lean in a little bit. You get clarity because, okay, I want to hear this story. As humans, we're natural problem solvers. So a story usually involves a problem. And we want to see, okay, here's the problem. What would I do? You want to sit in the shoes or stand in the shoes of the person who is in that story. That's something called narrative transportation, Gala. And so that's why it's so interesting to us. It's a way for us to transport ourselves into another sense of reality. So, story is really powerful. But when you're talking about business storytelling, there are three different types of stories a business can tell. One is the story of your customer, which is the marketing story. And typically, when we as businesses start telling stories about our business, we'll talk about, when the company was founded, or an award that we won, or we talk about some situation in our business. But really, the listener, the prospect, the customer, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear, what is it that you can do for me? How will it make my life better? And how do I start doing business with you? They want to know, does this apply to me? And once you can communicate, yes, this service or product does apply to you, then you can get into some of those other things. So the first story is the customer or client story of inviting them into a story and making them the hero, right? Because what we want to know is, what's in it for me. That's, as humans, what we want to know. So that's the customer or client story. The second story is very pertinent, especially now with what's going on in the world. And that is the story of your business. Right now, in the middle of the great resignation, it started a year ago, May 2021. We're recording this May 2022. And I saw this morning on LinkedIn, just last month, I think there were 4.5 million people quit their jobs, just, I guess it was in March. 4.5 million people quit their jobs in March. And this is happening because people have uh, kind of looked up, they got off their hamster wheel of chaos. They're looking around and deciding, I don't want this kind of life. If all I'm doing is to make my boss money, then that's not fulfilling for me. And so that being able to tell the story of your company, why it exists, why the people that are working there, that your team members, how they are making the world better, how they're making your customers' lives better, and connecting it to their skills and talents. That is a way to draw talent in. That is a way to keep your employees. If you can talk about why your company exists beyond the bottom line. So that's the second story. So you can see how these stories have different applications to bring in business, to bring in talent. But the third story, I think, is the most fascinating of all. And that is the story of you, the story of you as the business owner. Because what we know now is, if you look at what's going on in the world, people want to know who is at the head of the company. Whether you're a solopreneur, whether you have a small team, whether you're a big enterprise company, people want to know who is at the helm of the company and what they stand for and what are their values. And right now, there was a story done by Brand Builders Group, which is a personal branding consultancy, that people will do business with the company if they agree with the values of the founder. So, the last story a business should be working on, and the one that really makes you stand out in the marketplace, is your personal brand story. How are you different? Why do you care? And giving them a reason and a way to get an inside look at who you are, which accelerates that know, like, and trust factor. So, very long answer to this three types of stories, but having those stories, any or all of them, are really powerful to help your business.
Well, as our economy has is evolving, our work situations, I mean, we've been steeped in for a long time of this employer employee relationship, but with the great resignation, things have shifted to
Mm-hmm.
where there's probably going to be many more independent contractor type of scenarios. Hey, I will serve you and work with you, but on a different relationship, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it we the mentality is, I think, in my perspective, shifting more and more, that we're all entrepreneurs, show up for who we serve in a different way. And so the fact of shaping our personal story is more important than ever.
It really is because people want to know who they are going to do business with. Are they an expert? Are they someone that they can trust? And do they align with them? Do they share some of those same values and priorities? I think it's really important. But you're exactly right, Gayla, is people have decided that when someone else can control their destiny, and this is kind of what happened to me when I was walking out of an organization that I had been a founder of, and the decision was not mine at that point. When the carpet is pulled out from under you, I think people decide, okay, do I want to be in control of my life or do I want someone else to control it? So the appeal of the freedom of choosing who you want to work with, where you want to work, and the flexibility. If I want to be on a call and be putting away my groceries at the same time, I have the flexibility to do it. Or, making an appointment in the middle of the day, having that. I think that's very appealing to have that autonomy, and more people are heading that way.
And I the pandemic did have like a wake up call for a mindset shift, a collective mindset shift that I had realized I did that 10 years ago, leaving a
Mm-hmm.
corporate position. You did way back when, leaving your educational career behind and having that maybe a little bit of an identity crisis of really filling the shoes of who I am. How am I going to show up in this world, and how am I going to serve? Um, and developing that personal brand, stepping into the shoes, and like that uh, coach that you had met at that networking event, someone else realizing, hey, you're holding back, but we just don't realize. I think that uh, with this great resignation, people are more, I think we're more enlightened on how we can uh, serve others, earn a living, the possibilities on how to earn a living and how to help others to earn a living is limitless. And I'm fascinated by that. And uh, and you being a business storyteller, helping draw out stories to grow a business is wonderful. So how do you do that with how do you work with clients? How do you get that story drawn out?
It depends on what their problem is. If they're trying to find more business, then We will do the customer story. We'll go in and look at, okay, how do people interact with you? What is it that they want? What's the pain they have? And how do you help them overcome it? But when it gets to personal branding, this is what I have come to find that is so fascinating is when we get ready to tell our story and we look and dig into who we are, there are the stories we tell the world, there are the stories we tell ourselves, and then there's the stories buried inside of our soul. And if you look at that, the stories we tell the world, that's what we're putting out on social media. That's what we're talking about at a networking event. That's how we're showing up. But the stories inside of our soul are things that we don't want people to know about us. Some of them are not grounded in reality. So some of the limiting beliefs that we have of, imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough, a tendency towards perfectionism, people who are just, I call them helpers, but they really go beyond and they're not helping to help people. They're helping people so they can feel better about themselves. So some of these stories that we tell ourselves, we don't have an awareness of those. And so that is something that when I work with clients, if they want to go into some of those, which really is mindset work, and understand that, excuse me, who they really are is not always the story they're telling themselves. And then that story inside of their soul is part of my program I have as well, is really looking at finding what is your purpose and what did you come to the world to do. So I do have a program. It is called The Difference Is You. And we do dig into stories on those three different levels. The first level is, of course, the personal story, the stories that you tell the world, because that typically, if we're working with someone who either owns a business or are working in a business and they're trying to advance their career or trying to, look at professional development of how they position themselves in their career, it's looking at we do a personal brand audit. We do a lot of personality type assessments, and I've got a series of questions that help them identify that. So the difference is you can either be done one-on-one, or I do have a small group program that we go through. It's an 8-week program and come out on the other side with your personal brand defined.
That is great. And you host your own podcast.
I do. I do. It is called Your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand. And it is a mixture of solo episodes and interviews with people who are passionate about what they do. They are very much tied with their work and their life integrated into their purpose. And many of them show up with a personal brand. So it is full of tips for people who are looking for how to integrate purpose into their life, how to find work that they love, and to be inspired by it.
Well, when you say finding work that you love, I mean, and this podcast has the, work fun flavor into it, because I believe that we can find work that is fun, and it's up to us to uh, get on that journey to find that, because work does not have to be a negative 4-letter word. It can be a positive 4-letter word. How do you, what's your perspective on, because owning a business or, life in general is hard and there's challenges, but how do you can, what's your take on finding that balance or that drive of continuing on with work, whereas at this point may not be fun at this point, but overall, getting through the challenges.
Right. Owning your own business, you have to love what you do, or you have to have a bigger reason, because you are not always going to have great days. You are going to run into situations that are a challenge. You're going to ask yourself, what am I doing? Like look up, what am I doing here? Some of those days happen. And so what I have found, Gayla, is being able to tie what you do into making someone else's life better. Because if you make it about only about you, if you make it only about you're chasing a dollar sign, when you get to a point of your life, you are looking for significance. Why do I matter? Why am I here? How can I leave a ripple effect in the world to understand that there is value in who I am? And so, sure, we can get caught up in jobs that, if you're in a position in your job and you just don't like your job, you've got one of two choices. You can either find something within the job that you can find joy in. Maybe it's bringing up your other team members. Maybe it's making your customers uh, remark and just be delighted. Find something in that job that you can get excited about. And if you can't do that, there's a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of jobs out there. And if there's not one you can find, then invent one. Invent one. Start as a side gig. Make sure it's a viable business, something people are going to want. Try it out. But I find that much of it is trying to find the piece that you can connect what you love, what your skills, what really sets you on fire to a need that is out within your work.
I was brought up, I don't know, that's the wrong word, but I was taught early on that you always keep work and personal separate. It's harder and harder, or that philosophy seems to have shifted, because who we are in our personal life is so much of what we do in our work life. And so have you
I
had
agree.
any experience with that? It took me a while to break that habit, that it is okay for people to kind of get to know me a little bit more than who I am in my work role.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, the more I think about it is professional development and personal development. Those bleed together. It's hard to separate one from the other because we are a human. We show up at work. We bring our emotions. We have personal agendas. We have limiting thoughts. We have a need for recognition. And so, how do you pull that out of your work? But, it's fascinating. A few weeks ago on the podcast, there was a gentleman that came on. His name's Jim Hewling. He is the author of The Four Disciplines of Execution, an amazing business book that with Franklin Covey and Sean McChesney. But he talked about a conversation he had that when people go to work, they've left 40% of themselves in the car. And when you think about it, how can someone feel loyal to a company? How can they feel connected to a company if the best part of their day is when they get back in the car and reunite with the other 40% of them? When you think about that. So that is, I think that's really hard. I think we have to realize that the way work is going, the new world of work, you are not employing robots. You're not on an assembly line anymore. People are showing up to work, and if they want to give their whole self, if they want to give their full effort, you've got to recognize them as a person. And so that's where I really believe we have to be willing to bring our whole selves to work, knowing that, of course, there are things that are not appropriate at work, um, but still sharing a part of you. And I do want to mention this week on my episode or on the podcast episode, I do one on visibility, which has been something that has been very much of a struggle for me throughout my whole life. Just because, when, and it is for many people. as children, we are taught this is what is acceptable and this is what is not. And so you start hiding those parts of yourself away until you end up, showing up one way, but the rest of you is kind of buried inside, which is why I love my program is being able to dig into some of those and rediscover who you are.
Well, professionalism and personal does not have to be a separate type of thing. You can you can be respectful and professional and still yourself.
Yes, you really can. And that's the joy of the diversity of people and bringing that to the table. Think about the world if we were all alike. How boring would that be?
Yeah, we would have collective think, that's for sure. And we wouldn't get very far in this world. Look at it's just the diversity is wonderful. Well, I I want to ask you a little bit about your podcast. I know from experience that creating a a podcast is is a lot of work and can be a challenge. For you, why did you choose podcasting and what keeps you going?
All right. What a great question, Gayla. Why I chose podcasting is I wanted to have a platform where I could really share my opinions and my philosophies with the world and bring in people that demonstrated that in their lives. One of the great things about interviewing people on a podcast is you get to learn from others. Like I have learned so much interviewing my guest and been able to use it in my work. So that is one thing. The second, it's a way to test some of your content out there and see what type of feedback you get. I like it because it's evergreen. Once you record an episode, as long as you leave it up, it's going to be there, and people may find you on episode 75 and go back and listen. So, it's a great way to do that. But right now, this week was episode 16. I think I've got recorded up to the mid 20s right now. Um, but what I am finding is I'm finding a cadence and rhythm of where I'm comfortable doing this. I don't like being where I'm recording something and it plays next week. I don't like the pressure of that. But I love the ability to, it's almost like when I was in education, lesson planning. Like I've got a big story to tell, and where I plug people in, I'm taking people on a journey. So it's a way to educate people, inspire people, and just encourage them that they could do it too.
Well, from my experience, learning the art of batching and working ahead of the game had been a game changer in stress level.
Yes.
And it's and there's some friction in that because you're learning a new thing and it's like, okay, how do I get this? How do I weave this into my schedule that's already busy? And that why has to be outweigh the hard. It
Yeah,
sure
it really
does.
does. I think the other thing I love about it is it's forcing me to be consistent.
Mhm.
Whereas, if you have an email list and don't email them on a regular basis, or social post, you don't do that. But when you have a podcast, and in my intro or my trailer, it says we show up weekly. So now I've told the world that now I've got to get it out there. So it's a forced personal accountability that I like, and it's really important to find a team too. I've got an amazing podcast producer. If anyone's looking for one, just contact me. I'm happy to share his name. And then someone to help with some of the show notes and some of the extra admin pieces.
Yes. And as uh, mm, we do we do some and when it comes to content production, that consistency piece, and that's what we tell our clients is like we need to have something with a publication deadline. and that holds
Yes,
you accountable. And we, as in our micro businesses, our businesses of very few people, our personal branding businesses, uh, that consistency helps build that trust and relationship and accountability for ourselves. And
it does.
it's uh, a wonderful exercise. It's sometimes a little bit painful to get started, but kudos to you, Lisa. Though right now at recording, you say that you've published 16 and you've got a few more in the can getting ready to publish. Our friend Mike Kim had told me one time that a vast majority of podcasters who start out can't get past episode 7. Once you get past episode 7, you know, you can get some momentum and going with that. So kudos to you. Keep going. When he told me that, because I was just kind of at this, well, I'm at episode such and such. And he's like, what? Excuse me? So that's a big deal. So I thought I'd share. You
Yeah,
need to.
you are exactly right. You're exactly right. Most people and most of the podcasts out there have either one or two episodes. I think people think it's going to be easy. Um, but again, find the fun in it.
Mhm.
Find the part that gets you excited. Like, what if my favorite parts of podcasting is when I hit publish? I'm like, okay, that one's done. Yeah, it was some work. That one's done, and then seeing the reaction to it. So
Yes.
find the good part of it.
Find the good part of it. And it's one thing to start a podcast. It's another thing to be a podcaster, and a podcaster continues. So kudos to you, Lisa, on that. Um, I would love for you to share a resource, your favorite resource, or a book that has really made a difference for you, either personally or professionally, or both, because we've kind of wrapped things up together.
Yes. There is a book that I discovered last year that really changed my life, and it is a book by Gay Hendricks. It's called The Big Leap. He actually was on my one of my early podcasts when I introduced the idea of purpose. And the part that I love about it is Gay talks about we have an upper limit problem. You know, when things are going well, when your things are successful, we have a tendency to sabotage it because we feel like we don't deserve that success. And so in this book, he talks about the difference between working in your zone of excellence, your zone of genius. And when you work in your zone of genius, that's when you lose all track of time. That's when you um, like it doesn't feel like work. And so that has been a resource for me that has given me perspective, and I've integrated into my the differences you program as well, of helping people understand how you move from liking your job to loving your job is finding more ways to work in your zone of genius. And so that would be a recommendation I would have to anyone is that book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap.
That is a very good book. That one affected me as well. And as business owner, sometimes we get, well, and just in life in general, we get navigated to where sometimes we get off track of being outside of our zone of genius. And that's when there's discord.
Absolutely.
And then it's just like, I'm not liking my job anymore. I'm not liking it.
Hmm.
And that's because there's a disconnect between the zone of genius. Like, and as a business owner, if you're not liking your job, you're not, and you did 6 months ago, what's different?
Exactly.
What have you found yourself doing that perhaps should be delegated, you know, or go back to, why are you doing this thing when this made you so much happier? So I love that.
Yes. Yes. I find too, sometimes I'll see something and go try it. It's, chasing squirrels, and it becomes a big distraction. And that's what happened to me, I think, last year when Clubhouse started heating up a little bit. I jumped into that for a while and then realized, looked up 3 months later, I'm like, what am I doing? And then I got off of that. But that's very easy to do. And as entrepreneurs, we do like to try things.
And interesting that you say that. Yeah, I find myself, following squirrels, but then sometimes we have to go through that process to kind of weed
Mm.
out, because recently the squirrel that I was following had a breakthrough. It was like,
Oh.
oh, this is the direction of that, like, is a domino effect that would make everything else better. It was
Hmm.
that exploratory thing. And if it weren't for chasing that squirrel a little bit and kind of getting down in that squirrel hole where that discovery would have not been made, I would have been doing things always the same. So I think that we do have to, especially as entrepreneurs and exploring, we do have to follow those squirrels once in a while.
We do. You never know where they're going to lead, but you also need to be self-aware of, okay, when is this counterproductive?
Is this counterproductive or is this not? There's that is so true. Well, Lisa, it has been a joy of having this conversation with you. How can we continue to follow you? What's the best way?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm also on Instagram at I am Lisa McGuire. My website is lisamcguire.com, LISAMCGUIRE. And I would love to connect with anyone.
Excellent. I love your podcast. I'm a listener, and I'll have all of those links in the show notes. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Gayla. I really enjoyed it.